Welcome to Destination Community Church. Thank you so much for being with us today. I want to really quickly preface this sermon with telling you what happened after the first song. Basically, what happened was we're having a kid's graduation today. We're having this first service and second service. We had one kid this morning who loves to be on stage. Like, he loves to be on stage. But we're back there, and I said, "All right, buddy, it's time to come up." And he's looking at me like this. And I'm like, what do I do in this moment? So he wasn't wanting to come up, so that's why Danette came over and was like, "Are we doing it?" And I was like, I apologize, Danette, for accidentally placing you in that position. But did you read Psalm 23 this week? Raise your hand if you read it at least. Whoa. Just a second. Raise your hand if you read it at least once this week. Not including last Sunday, all right? You read it at least once this week. Okay, how many of you read it maybe not even every day, but multiple times this week? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I hope that as we get a little bit deeper into this material, that it will mean more to you as a result of taking this to the Heavenly Father one-on-one every day. Now, this week, I'd like you to add a component to that. I'd like you to take not the entire thing, but just your favorite part, or maybe a specific little section that for whatever reason means a lot to you. It could be what we're talking about today, "He restores my soul," and just memorize that. And just say that to yourself throughout the course of the week several times. Just memorize just a teeny tiny part of it and continue to read it every day that you can. All right, we're in part 2 of our series on Psalm 23. Last week we introduced the Good Shepherd and discussed characteristics of the Good Shepherd. We said that the Good Shepherd is on the clock or on the job how often? 24 hours a day. Kay's here. All right, we looked at the fact that he looks after the weakest sheep. The Good Shepherd practices diligent and meticulous care for the sheep. The Good Shepherd meets the need for hunger, and the Good Shepherd leads us beside still waters. And this is just a start. And what we're really doing with a lot of this information is we're just framing a theology of what God the Father is and how this looks in our day-to-day lives and how this shapes who we are throughout the course of this relationship. We talked about getting away from some of the false ideas that we actually have about God. So what we want to do today, and the direction that we want to look at, is very specifically the souls of the sheep, or more specifically, the souls of individuals. So this is where we are throughout the course of our 4 weeks. Last week we talked about characteristics of the Good Shepherd. Next week we will look at valleys, death, and comfort. Week 4, the last topic, will be we are being followed. And today I'm asking this question very specifically: how's your soul? How's your soul in relation to the characteristics of this shepherd that we have discussed? What is the condition of your soul? So let's just go ahead and step right into the passage. We are looking at this today. Last week it was the English Standard Version, and today we're going to look at this at the New King James Version. Hopefully you got your outline whenever you came in, so you can follow along there with our passage. So here we go. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Or as we've said about other translations, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. And then here's our key focus today: He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and we all do, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over, or as our translation said last week, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, what's exciting about this is that if you took a couple days last week, or maybe even every day, to look at this passage, you look at it a little bit differently than you did last week. And the reason for that is this. You are reading them for whatever reason, that surely goodness and mercy, or maybe the part where it says, my cup runs over, whatever it might be throughout your week, as you looked at this passage very closely, there were parts that you really, really held on to. And you were probably thinking, I really hope Matt talks about that. Or I really hope Pastor Lee talks about that. And the unfortunate part is in 4 weeks, we're not going to be able to get to everything that I'd like to be able to get into, because as I said last week, this is really an 8 or 10-week sermon message series. And what we're trying to do is squeeze that in to 4 weeks. So this is where we want to be today and what we want to very specifically focus on. He restores my soul. He restores my soul. What does that mean? What does it mean to say that the shepherd or God the Father restores my soul? You see, there are a lot of things in life that you can restore on your own. There are a lot of things in life that you can restore on your own. For example, you can take an old car and you can restore that. You probably can. I can't. All right, but some of you can probably restore an old car. You can actually restore your eyesight without having LASIK surgery, without, for some people, having to get glasses. There are actually exercises that you can do with your eyes to restore your eyesight. You can restore your core. All right, that's why I'm going to start going to Shannon Sloan's gym here pretty soon. That's something I was talking to him about. You can restore your core. You can restore your iPhone. You can restore your home. Or a lot of times people will talk about restoring their kitchen. You can restore your playlist on your iPhone. You can restore your credit, which is a really good idea if you have bad credit. You can even sometimes, if you have the willpower, you can restore your own way of thinking. You can even restore your own way of thinking, but there's something that you can't restore. You cannot restore your own soul. You cannot restore your own soul. You see, there are times in the Christian life in which you go through what could be considered a time of weariness or a time of darkness. And it seems as if God is no longer present. And if we were to go throughout the course of this, all through this room, and talk about different circumstances and different situations that we were in, there would be literally dozens, if not hundreds, of stories of different situations that you've been in which you felt the presence of God and you knew that God was strong in your life, but then for some reason, some circumstance, something that happened, you really started to ask questions about that reality. Those questions are okay. I just want to make sure that's clear. Those questions are okay. You can ask God questions. That's not a sin. In fact, it's part of the period of growth. So you go through this time of darkness, you feel really sad, maybe you feel like walking away. But what some of you do in the midst of that is you continue to seek Him. You just continue to seek Him. And you say, I know enough at this point to know that I am not going to move. I am going to stay put. I am going to stay right here. I am going to be present in that moment. And then eventually, sometimes in a short period of time, sometimes in a longer period of time, He restores your soul. You see, one of the most difficult things for me to watch, and as a pastor, you watch it all the time, is when people walk away. And I'm not just talking about walking away from church. You know, you don't see people 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. You know, usually you'll reach out to these people. You'll call them. You'll text them. You'll run into them. You'll send them a message on Facebook, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden they start talking about a circumstance that came up in their lives. All right, someone passed away and I'm in this grieving process and I just can't go back to church. Or I had this particular issue happen and for whatever reason, I just can't bring myself back to church. Or I feel that God should have not done this in my life. It doesn't seem just. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem like a good God. So they walk away. Now, the key to the Christian life and the key to this spiritual journey is to hold on really tight in those moments. To hold on really tight in those moments, because you can really understand very little about a person's faith if they refuse to hold on in those tight moments. You only know restoration of the soul when you walk through the weary moments of the soul. You only know restoration of the soul whenever you walk through weary moments of the soul. And this is what I mean by that statement. Often whenever we do go through these difficult circumstances, and all of a sudden we have a better offer on the table, or God simply does not seem present, people make the decision to go over the issue, or to go around the weary moment, or to try to go under the weary moment. But you see, Christian faith and Christian growth and Christian understanding is all part of this process of going through these weary moments of the soul. And as a result of that, what happens is the soul is restored. The soul is restored. And it's an absolutely incredible, amazing feeling, and it affirms over and over and over and over again in your life that God does in fact exist. That God in fact does care for you. That the shepherd is on the clock 24 hours a day. That the shepherd is making sure that he is taking care of you at all times. That the shepherd is actually looking out for the weaker sheep. You come to understand that when you say, I am not going to budge. I am going to stay put. This doesn't feel right at the moment, but I am going to hold on because I believe that God is good. So this phrase, he restores my soul, this phrase is absolutely packed with meaning. So what I want us to do is take two words in the ancient Hebrew, take two words and look at these two words very closely. The first word is soul, and the second word is restore. We said that he restores our soul. So what does that mean? What does it mean in the life of a believer when we say that God actually restores the soul? The word for soul comes from the word nephesh, is how it's actually pronounced. It's used 765 times in the Old Testament. And what this word literally means is life, or the non-material part of the body. You think about the physical part of the body, so I want you to think about the non-material part of us. The body and soul are separate, yet invisible partners throughout human life. The original use of this word, nephesh, means breath. In other words, when God breathes into Adam, what God is doing is creating life within Adam. What God is doing is he is creating a soul that is all of a sudden in the world. That's what this word means. Now, the verb for restore is used much more often. It's used 1,060 times. And this word can mean refreshed or moved back to the original place that you were. But when you're moved back to this original place that you were, you're better off than you were before. In other words, it's a very active verb. It requires intensive action, and it's talking about this 24-hour shepherd. So when we make this statement, and when David makes the statement in Hebrew, whenever he says, he restores my soul, this is what he is saying to you today. This is what God is saying. This is what the shepherd is saying to you today. God is actively working to put life back into you, but in an even better way than it was before. All right, so that's what that means. Life is good. All of a sudden, life takes a turn for the worst. You're full of anxiety. Your marriage is in a difficult place. You're having a difficult time with your kids. You don't understand just the circumstances. We all have circumstances that happen that we can't understand. It's amazing how one day can be so good, and then because of a series of events, it feels like our entire world falls apart. We call that life. All right, those things happen. But this is what God is saying, or what David is saying when he is saying that God, or the shepherd, restores his soul. God is actively working around the clock, this 24-hour shepherd, to put life back into you, but in an even better way than you've ever experienced before. Second thing I want you to recognize this morning is that in God's perfect timing, He is always ready to restore your soul. In God's perfect timing, He is always ready to restore your soul. The problem that we tend to have with this is that we really like our timing. It's the reason that so many of you, in an immature sense of Christianity and in an immature sense of an understanding of God, when things tend to get a little bit difficult, it's much more convenient to walk away. It's much more convenient to try to find a better option. It's much more convenient to throw yourself into a really bad relationship. Whatever it might be to try to distract everything that's going on within your soul. This is what we do as humans. We look, if we have to drown ourselves out and binge watch on Netflix, we'll do it. If we have to consume ourselves with food and just eat and eat and eat, we'll do it. If we have to get online and look for a really, really poor relationship, we'll do it. We will do whatever it is, whatever we feel that it takes to distract from the problems that are occurring within our own soul. And what we're not realizing is that in God's perfect timing, He is always ready to restore the soul. Now, I've told you about last week about my recent education in the life of sheep. I can tell you anything about sheep that you want to know. Now, not everything, but most things. All right, I can't actually deliver a sheep or anything like that. All right, so you see this sheep that's laying down. Now, you see another sheep that's staring right at it, just looking at it like, well, that seems unfortunate. You know, obviously that sheep can't do anything about it. Does anybody know, does anybody happen to know what that sheep that's laying down, does anybody know what that's called? That's a cast down sheep. All right, that's a cast down sheep. And what this means, you guys remember, if you're old enough, the old commercial, I'm falling and I can't get up? All right, that's kind of what's going on here, but there's no life alert for this sheep. All right, so this sheep is completely, then this may look funny. It definitely seems unfortunate, but make no mistake about it. This sheep is completely helpless. This sheep is completely helpless. In other words, when a cast down sheep tips over in this way, it cannot get up. All right, it cannot get up. And there are many sheep in this situation that stay that way, and they end up dying that way as a result. Now, if you were to examine your own life very closely, you would recognize that at one time or another, and maybe even today, you've been that cast down sheep. You have been that completely helpless creature. You see, no one comes to Jesus unless they have the need. No one comes to Jesus. Now, you may come to church without the need. In other words, it's very common if someone's ran from God for a long time, they're middle-aged, they get married, they have a kid. Oh, honey, it's time to go back to church. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. Usually people who decide they're going to come in these doors for the first time that didn't come to church before are desperate. Usually when they come into church, it's because they have a great need in their heart, and they know that everything else they've tried has not worked out. They are a cast-down sheep. Please get this morning. It is not only the shepherd that sees the cast-down sheep. It's also the predator. It's also the predator. Buzzards, vultures, dogs, coyotes, cougars. The cast-down sheep is a quick meal. And when influenced by the enemy and other sources, when you are having trouble within your own soul, you are a quick meal. And if the shepherd does not show up, this sheep will surely die. Because this sheep's not getting up on its own. And as you can see, his buddy's not helping him. All right, so this sheep has one of two ways to go, which is going to lead us to the next point. The only means of survival for the sheep is the care and protection of the shepherd. The only means of survival for the sheep, for you, 24 hours a day in your life, as you go to work, as you raise your kids, as you take care of your finances, as you plan your vacation, as you go through the tragedies that will inevitably happen in your life because you're human. The only full protection that you have is the protection of the shepherd. But you see, some of you have convinced yourself, some of you in this room right now, that you can survive on your own. You've never recognized the need. You're on the outside of this God question. You're on the outside of this whole church thing, and you're still looking in with a tremendous amount of skepticism saying, what all is this about? And even though you may not admit it, you see a tremendous amount of self-sufficiency that you feel as if you carry yourself. Keller said this in the book that I mentioned to you guys. You got to get the book. The book is great. One of the greatest revelations of the heart of God given to us by Christ is that of himself as the shepherd. He has the same identical sensations of anxiety, concern, and compassion for cast men and women as I, Philip Keller talking, he was a shepherd, as I had for these cast sheep. So the point that I'm trying to make is this. Whenever you see yourself in this position in life, and I know for a fact because I talked to some of you throughout the course of the week, there are several individuals that are in this room right now, and there are several individuals that will be in this room in about 30 to 45 minutes that are cast down sheep in this moment. You are in a moment where you are completely helpless and you cannot understand why God would do this. You cannot understand why you are going through some of the circumstances that you are going through. So just a little bit of context with Psalm 23, just a little bit of context. Psalm 23 was written by who? David. Okay, Psalm 23 is written by David. David is also a shepherd. Now, David is able to write Psalm 23 and is able to talk about the life of a shepherd because he understands what it means to shepherd. But make no mistake about this. David is not the shepherd in Psalm 23. David is a sheep, just like you and I. And what that means is that David understands sin. David understands struggle. David understands temptation. David understands fear. David understands worry. David has been through every single bit of this. But you see, David didn't always understand that. And David went through some of the same kinds of moments, though his were more drastic, some of the same kind of moments that you've been through in your life. Now, as some of you read Psalm 23 last week, my guess is that you looked at it as a psalm of optimism. Like you thought, I might be down, things may not be that great, but the shepherd's always here. The shepherd looks after the weak sheep. The shepherd is taking care of me. The shepherd is providing spiritual food. The shepherd is providing spiritual water. The sheriff, I don't know, Hunt might be providing some spiritual food, but if he is, I'm not sure about it. All right, so he's providing all these things, and this is wonderful, but please don't necessarily just see David through this lens. So what I want to do is share just 4 verses out of another psalm that comes a little bit earlier, Psalm 13. You have notes about that. You can look it up a little bit later. But I want you to look at the condition of David's soul and how this is just a little bit different. So let's look at Psalm 13, 1 through 4. This is the International Standard Version. This doesn't sound like the same David. All right? So pay close attention to this. How long? Lord, will you forget me forever? And I know that's where some of you are today. How long do I have to go through this? I mean, are you just going to forget me forever? You're supposed to be God. How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I struggle in my what? Soul. How long must I struggle in my soul at night and have sorrow in my heart during the day? Some of you are not sleeping. And the second you have to get out of bed, you don't want to get out of bed. Because of everything that you... Listen, this is very real, very practical, 21st century stuff. How long must I struggle in my soul at night and have sorrow in my heart during the day? How long will my enemy rise up against me. Look at me. I mean, can you imagine talking to God this way? Look at me. Answer me, Lord, my God. Give light to my eyes. Otherwise, I will sleep in death. That's what we would call in the 21st century deep clinical depression. Otherwise, my enemy will say, I have overcome him. Otherwise, my persecutor will rejoice when I am shaken. Now, I share this with you for this reason. What I want to do is show you a parallel between where David has been and where you may be today, and then what happens to David 10 Psalms later with what we see in Psalm 23. So just a few comparisons as far as where you may be today. Let's look at this first one. He says in Psalm 13, how long will you hide your face from me? And again, some of you are in that place today. How long am I going to have to continue to go through this period of unknowing? And then he says in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd and I lack nothing. The Lord is my shepherd and I lack nothing. I know you are here in this moment. I know that you're present. I trust that. Next statement, Psalm 13. Give light to my eyes. God, I don't feel as if I can see. I have no direction whatsoever. Psalm 23. He leads me by green pastures and still waters. Everything is going to be okay. I'm taken care of. Psalm 13. How long will my enemies or my enemy rise up against me? Psalm 23. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. The confidence, the progress, the provision is all growing. Psalm 13, my persecutor will rejoice. My enemy will rejoice when I'm shaken. Psalm 23, I'm not going to be shaken because I fear no evil. I fear no evil. And this is the most important one here for what we're talking about today. Look at this. Psalm 13. How long must I struggle in my soul at night? As many of you put your head on your pillow and you think about waking up the next day with all the stress, all the turmoil, all of the issues that are going on right now in your life, can you tell yourself, He restores my soul? He restores my soul. Do you see the amazing growth here? Do you see something of the spiritual process that God puts us through, that we come to understand, as we say, in the most difficult moments of our lives? I will trust in you. I know that you are going to take care of me. I know that I can't see what is before me right now. I don't know how this relationship with my significant other is going to end. I don't know what my husband or wife are going to decide. I don't know how I'm going to pay this next bill. I don't know how I'm going to step through this next milestone. I don't know how I'm going to deal with this depression and this anxiety, this mental illness that I'm struggling with. I don't know what I'm going to do about this, or I don't know what I'm going to do about that. But what if you develop the mindset that you are willing to say to yourself every day, just as David did, through learning, He restores my soul. You see, David starts a life with amazing trust in God. What do we know about David? We know the kid that slays Goliath, that kills the giant. We know about the shepherd boy that becomes king. Jesse said, I've showed you all my boys. Well, what about the boy in the field? Something special about this kid. But then, eventually, down the road, King David falls. David then carries the weight of an empty and dry soul. But then David realizes something. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. And then eventually, through waiting, He restores David's soul. We follow Jesus, and we're able to follow Jesus because we live for the moments in which the dry valleys and the dark nights become still waters and green pastures. We know he restores the soul. For years, and I'm careful about what elements of my story I share. And I was very thoughtful about this throughout the course of this week. There was a time for years that I didn't pray. I didn't pray because I thought prayer was for weak people. And the only time that I ever prayed was when I was up at night, so jacked up on speed that after everyone had left, party's over, my heart is beating out of my chest because of the coke, that I prayed that God help me fall asleep. And I would say, God, if you will help me fall asleep, I will never use these drugs again. Only to use those drugs again the next night or a few nights later. There was a time in my life after drugs that it bothered me to hear birds chirping in the morning because I associated that with staying up all night and the sun coming up as I was coming down off of drugs. And even the sound bothered me. My soul has been restored. My soul has been restored, and I've walked through those valleys. This week, I was at seminary, and on a Thursday, this past Thursday, we had a retreat of silence in which you spend a whole day, an entire day in silence. I know you think that sounds wonderful. All right, so I'm sitting in this small estate, and a guy that I go to school with that actually happens to be from this area, he comes up to me and he says, he's kind of got a smile on his face, but also looks a little bit nervous. He's only been married a couple months. And he says, I've lost my wedding ring. And I thought, first you broke the silence. But then I thought, you're dead. So immediately I get up and I start walking around, looking underneath stuff, disturbing everyone else that's around, trying to help this, doing more work than he was, because I know his wife's going to kill him, trying to help him find his ring. And he's like, the ring's not that big of a deal. I can get another one. And I said, you can get another one. But the bride put that ring on. There is some significance behind that ring. So we go in the bathroom. And this guy looks at us and he's like, Richard? He said, what are you guys looking for? And I said, we're looking for his ring. He's like, dude, you're so dead. So we can't find his ring. And all of a sudden, I say, can't you think of where? Because Beth knows I'm horrible at looking for things. And I'm the one looking for a tiny little ring. And then he says, well, sometimes when I wash my hands, I kind of, we'll kind of wipe it off. And I thought, the trash can. So I take the trash can lid off in the bathroom, not the cleanest trash. That's the one place other than maybe the kitchen that you just don't want to go through the trash. So I take the lid off and I start going through all of this trash, opening up dirty, I did wash my hands later, all right? Opening up dirty paper towels and all that in the men's restroom. And then eventually I find his ring. Found it. Can you believe that, Beth? I found it. And I gave it to him, and I looked at him, and I said, you owe me dinner. But then I started to think about all of the trash that the shepherd dug through to get to me. And the way that he persistently, over and over and over, pursued me in dark days that I would not talk about up here. Things that I would not be completely comfortable sharing with my wife. He's restored my soul. I found that ring. I said, you put that ring on, you glue that ring on, you don't. You hold on to that ring. The last point that I want to make this morning is that God always restores the soul of those that wait on him. God always restores the soul. See, if you don't wait on him, you don't necessarily know this experience. Because if you went to other places and other things in your life, but if you make the decision through this difficult time, I will wait on you. You know what the beauty of the Hebrew word is? And this is not a text here, but I'm just talking about the beauty of the word wait. It doesn't mean to simply sit there and wait. It means to eagerly expect and anticipate what God is going to do. Psalm 25:3 says this, no one who waits for you will be put to shame. Verse 6, same chapter says this, for you I will wait all day. You're in here and you're struggling. The soul is weary. The soul is weak. I'll make you a promise that period of time is coming to an end. And you will reap joy that you have never known. Because you can't find it on Netflix. And you're not going to find it in another human being. You're not going to find it in a job. You are not going to find it in a paycheck. You are not going to find it in a new home or a new car or all of the food that you can eat. You're not going to find it in any of those places. You will find it in the shepherd, and you will find it in the shepherd alone. Some of you are in a very difficult place today for a variety of reasons. And I want to give you one piece of advice, if I may. Wait on God. Wait on God. Don't take a single step without him. The biggest mistakes that I have made in ministry, the biggest mistakes I have made is when I have went forward without God's confirmation. Wait on God, because the shepherd is always on time. The shepherd doesn't call in sick. The shepherd doesn't miss appointments. The shepherd doesn't blow you off. The shepherd restores souls.